Marcus. How are you?
Hey, welcome to the Edge television broadcast.
Thank you.
Man, I'll tell you what, I love Skype because you sound like you're in the room.
Good. That sounds great because I have got a fancy pants microphone and even a pop filter. So.
Oh my goodness! Hey, I'll tell you what, we're always popping over here at the Edge, but tonight we might be doing a little hoot owling. And I tell you what, I know when I touched base with you initially, Mike, I said that I have some owl in my history, and I definitely. So I thought, wow, when I saw your bio and I saw Coast and various things, and I saw some of your work, and I thought, man, I got to get you on a program. Well, Mike, welcome to the program. Before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself, what you're about, how you got to write some of your books, and what do you do?
Hi. So I'm 55 years old. I've had all kinds of jobs over the decades. I worked as an illustrator, professional illustrator for many years. I worked as an outdoor educator, teaching people mountaineering and winter camping, and then in 2006, I went on a camping trip and saw a handful of owls. That's kind of a long story, but it was kind of a heavy-handed event for me. Kind of set me off on this path, and I have, it has changed my life. I've immersed myself in this kind of research, and I've been doing owl research and UFO research in conjunction. It feels like full-time. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but pretty much full-time for about the last 6 years.
Wow. You say your hiking adventure changed your life?
It sure did. Yes. It's two separate nights. I can tell the story if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear it.
So I was, excuse me. I was living out west. I was living near Grand Teton National Park. It was on the Idaho side of the park, and so I was right on the Wyoming border. And so what happens is, it's kind of and I'd been working in the outdoor industry, and I was just outdoor all summer long. It was autumn. I'd been up in Alaska all summer. I was totally in my element, and I met someone who had spent the summer there in this small town. I said, "Oh, you must have been camping a lot. You've been here all summer." And she looked at me and she said, "No, I haven't camped at all." And I was like, "That's terrible. Let's go out for one night." She said, "Okay, I will." And so we went. We went for one night, and so what we can do where I was living is you can carry a very light pack, and if you know there's not going to be any rain, you don't need to take a shelter, right? Just sleep out under the stars. No rain in the forecast. You could just look to the southern skies and just know that there wasn't going to be any rain. So we hiked in late afternoon, and we hiked deep into the mountains in just a couple hours, and then sun went down, and this was a stranger. This is kind of a first date with a complete stranger. Her name was Kristen, and we're sitting on a rock, and I'm making dinner on a little teeny camp stove, and the sun is setting, and the moon is rising, and we're in this field of wildflowers, and there's mountains all around us, and I remember she was saying something. She was saying something that I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. This is a really interesting person. And at that moment, an owl flew over our head, and then a second owl, and then a third owl. And for the next hour, as the sun went down, probably more like 2 hours, as the sun went down, these owls would fly around us. They'd land in tree branches near us. They'd kind of land close, step by. They'd swoop right above us. And we literally, laid down and went to sleep. We had our sleeping bags. We laid them just flat on the ground, a little sleeping pad. And they were swooping right past our faces, right? So you would lay on your back, and an owl would swoop right past your face, and it would blot out the stars for just 1/2 a second. And owls are very quiet, so it was a very surreal thing. And it lasted. The next morning is all we were talking about is owls, owls, owls. And then I said to her, "Let's do it again. Let's go hiking. Let's go camping again." So 4 days later, went to a totally different part of the mountains. This time it was a little colder. We had a tent with us this time, and it was colder, and it was a little bit windy, and I said, "Let's hike to the top of that hill before we climb into the tent. We can watch the sunset from up on that hilltop, and then we can walk back to the tent, and then we can climb in. We'll be just a little warm because we're just standing around. Felt like we're kind of chilled." She said, "Great." So we walk up this hill. We get to the top of the hill. We watch the sunset, and this owl lands right next to us on the ground, and then another owl lands in a tree branch, and then a third owl flies around, and then for the next hour, we're watching these 3 owls. I am convinced they were the same 3 owls.
Wow.
Now, to have it happen, this is a total miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So to have it happen once, that's pretty cool. To have it happen twice with the same person within a few days was kind of blew my mind. And at that point, I was all about just like, what's the owl symbolism? What's the synchron? What does it mean? What's the totem animal? And you look the stuff up online, and it's like a bottomless pit, right? You try Google owl totem animal, and you'll be lost for a month. There's just so much stuff out there. So I didn't talk about this at the time, but I'm talking about it now. It's in the book. When I saw those owls, both times, both nights, 3 owls landing on the ground near us, they were little owls. They were like, 12, 14 inches tall. They were very cute. And I had a voice in my head that was as clear can be. And the message was absolutely clear. The message was, this has something to do with the UFOs. I heard it. I knew it. I sensed it. It was this internal knowing. And afterwards, I started looking into my own experiences. And now, leading up to this, I had been, like you put a kettle on the stove, and right before it gets to boil, you can just kind of sense that it's just about to start to whistle. The boil is going to happen. And that's where I was in my life, where I knew that I had to look into these experiences. Growing up, I had missing time events. I had seen close-up UFOs. I had one time as a young man when I was 30, sat up in bed. There was a bright light coming in through the bedroom window, and I looked out the window. I was living in Maine at the time. It was wintertime, and there was this big bright light pouring through the window, and there were 5 spindly gray aliens walking towards the house. And let me tell you all of this stuff, the missing time, the UFO sightings, that I managed to push it all, bury it, ignore it, deny it, and I knew there was going to come a day when I would have to face all this stuff. And it was the owls. It was the owls that made me face this stuff. So what I started doing was researching owls, and then I started researching UFOs. And what I was really doing was, in a way, researching myself. So now here's a weird part. So remember the very first, with Kristen, the very first night, just before we saw the owls, she was saying something. I contacted her years later, and I said, listen, what were we talking about? You were saying something right before we saw those first owls. She had since moved away, and I hadn't seen her in a long time, but we still kept in touch. And she said, oh, I remember exactly what I was saying. I was giving my most heartfelt definition of what God meant to me. So that small detail paints such a rich picture. It adds so much depth to this thing. So right as she is talking about God, boom, these owls appear. And I have found that repeating in my research now. So in the recent years, so I got all crazy about this owl stuff. Like, I am not an objective researcher. I am subjective. I am interested in owls, and I don't stray very far beyond that. It's kind of a flaw. But what has happened is, and I've been writing articles and writing books, and I've got a website and podcasts from years ago. So if anyone Googles UFOs and owls, you Google UFO owl, push the button, my name is the first thing that comes up, and then it's about the next 20 things that come up below that. So if someone in New Zealand, someone in Finland has an experience with a UFO and an owl, they are going to find me. And what has happened is, I have been receiving so many reports, and people will ask me, like, well, is this real? How is this connected? What proof do you have? And I said, you want proof? You look at my email inbox. That's the proof. So for the last 6 or 7 years, it's not quite one a day, but close to one really good story a day. I get all kinds of owl stories, but really good owl and UFO story. One a day is about the average. And I am flooded with these amazing stories. I have more amazing stories at my fingertips than I could possibly ever make sense of. And and I've been trying to put them in these books. And so yeah, there's a long-winded answer. You asked a question, wow. and then I held the floor for about 15 minutes there.
Hey, not a problem. That was a fascinating story, Mike. And I'm wondering, is there any other bird that has so much connectivity or synchronicity involving UFOs or other synchronistic events than the owl?
Well, probably not UFOs. So I think the owl and UFOs kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, so and owls are rich in folklore all throughout in owls and death. So owls associated with funerals and people dying and the time of passing. That's very common. And then what's also very common is owls and shamanic initiation. Very interesting. And this. I mean, I've written about it, and I still am astounded by what happens, you do this kind of work and you end up meeting shamans and you just hear these stories. And so it's very common. Now, your question was any other birds. Well, there's certainly birds that have synchronistic power, eagles, certainly, and hawks. And I'll actually add hummingbirds. And they all have a different, you go to the medicine man you walk to the edge of the village and you go to knock on the teepee and the medicine man invites you in and you say, so I had an experience with a hummingbird. You say, oh, hummingbird has a different meaning than an owl or an eagle. So all of these animals have a different meaning. An owl is an animal of the night. An eagle is an animal of the day. So these have totally different kind of structures. Now, and both of them are pretty heavy right there. And so an owl is a very heavy totem. Unlike a hummingbird. Hummingbird is very light. So people have hummingbird experiences and synchronicities all the time. And they tend to be very playful and light and kind of buoyant and life affirming. So yeah, so there's all kinds of ravens and such too. So raven would be the mirror opposite in a way of the owl, because they come out in the day, but they have a very similar totem in the lore, in the mythology of the world.
Now, some people believe that owls bring bad luck, and is that because certain events happened to them and it became like part of the lore that owls bring bad luck? But I mean, why? For instance, you mentioned the totems. Why would different cultures sort of glorify owls if that was the case?
Well, there's certainly mythology of owls bringing bad luck, and you go to the Pueblo tribes in the southwest of the United States. There's a very, very dark mythology surrounding owls. You go to Sweden. There's just the opposite. It's a very, very buoyant, very, very life affirming mythology about owls. But at the same time, all over the world, it is a heavy thing. So if you get an owl message or an owl totem or an owl sighting, and obviously there's owls all over the place. It's when they arrive at these highly charged moments is what I'm concerned with. So yes, owls show up at funerals, and I have very few stories. I have a couple of them of an owl showing up before a death. What I have a lot of is owls showing up after someone passes. I have got so many accounts of people. Here's one. Someone's mother dies. Actually, it's an aunt, someone's aunt and someone's mother. So these two women die. The two cousins are the offspring. So there's Jill and Lon, and they had two different mothers. Those mothers were sisters. So they're cousins. Both their mothers died 11 days apart. And they're both grieving. They are both struck with so many owl synchronicities. Finally, Jill asks Lon, says, I'm grieving. What do I do? And Lon says, just wait for a sign. And she goes into her garage, and there's an owl. She moves a bucket on a shelf, and there's an owl on that shelf in her garage in Florida. And she unflinchingly starts a conversation with this owl, talks to it as her mom, says, Mom, I miss you. Mom, I'm so glad you're here. I miss you so much. I don't know what to do. I feel sad. She takes a picture of it. She gets on the phone and she talks to Lon. She said, Lon, I'm talking to an owl right now. She looks at the owl and she says, Mom, I'm talking to Lonnie on the phone. So and this goes on for a day. She comes back a day later and the owl's still there on the shelf, and she says, Mom, I got the message. You can go now. Thank you so much. And the owl flies off. I have that kind of story over and over and over again. So owl is associated with death. Death has got a dark foreboding, it's a heavy, but it's a part of life. There's no evading it. So there's a beautiful story that's associated with a dark event. So yes, there's certainly a folklore of, oh, if you hear an owl hooting, someone's going to die, but I would then add that you would have to have that at a highly charged moment. You would have to have a psychic premonition that it would be associated with that. I'm certain there are cases, I have a few, but not enough to really, they're far outweighed by these kind of, I keep on using the term buoyant, these kind of powerful life experiences rather than something bad luck.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got a number of questions coming in for you, Mike. Let's go ahead and get some of these going here. This is from Steve Ells. I don't know if where this question is going. But it says, "Is the brown from California related to the?" Oh, that has to do with my ranting points. Hang on, let's go to this one. What is your opinion of the owl worship in the Bohemian Grove? Have you ever heard the Bohemian Grove?
Oh yeah, I wrote about it in the first book. Yeah, so I had to write about that. I didn't want to really because it's kind of, I was kind of didn't want to get into the conspiracy thing. So the owl at the Bohemian Grove, it's a cement. It's made out of cement. I think there's a real rock underneath it, but it's made out of cement, and it's kind of this creepy looking owl, right? It's a spooky looking owl. Bohemian Grove is a men's club, no women allowed. That has been co-opted by the super elite. It's out of San Francisco. So in San Francisco, you can look it up. It's right in the phone book, the Bohemian Club. And then outside of San Francisco in the Redwood Forests, there's the Bohemian Grove. Now, Bohemian Grove that's like where the presidents meet. Mm-hmm. Every summer they have an event there, and they're supposedly they reenact rituals in front of this big owl and such. So the problem is that there is so much. I mean, the internet is a terrible way to try to research something like this because you're going to get drinking the blood of babies and human sacrifices. That's certainly out there in the literature. I don't think there's much proof of that. But what I can say is very important men, presidents, Rockefellers and Rothschilds all meet at this ranch in this forest, and there's photographs of it, a great big spooky owl that is behind a stage. An outdoor stage. Now, if you look at the literature of the Bohemian Club, they very clearly reference Athena over and over again. Athena is the Greek goddess of wisdom. Mm-hmm. She was often pictured with a little owl either on her shoulder or on her wrist or in flight nearby. In statues, in old, there's old terracotta pots with Athena. She has a war helmet on. She's the goddess of war. She's also the goddess of wisdom. She's the goddess of commerce. She's the goddess of arts and crafts too. So you have wisdom, commerce, war, right? So it should be of no surprise that an owl, if they're referencing Athena over and over and over again, that's where the owl comes from. It's referencing classical Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then this is from Floor Worker. It says, why does Texas Illuminati use owl tattoos on their bodies?
Well, I cannot answer that one at all. But I can say that owls are very beautiful, and they are not they're not bunny rabbits, right? They have a very strong foreboding power to them. Real owls are, this is what happens. So here, people see a real owl, just nothing. I mean, an owl lands in a branch. Everyone who sees an owl comes away saying, wow, I locked eyes with that owl. That was intense. So there's that vibe. You don't say that when you lock eyes with a bunny rabbit or a deer, right? So, yeah. But owls have a vibe about them. That's the closest thing we have to, I mean, it's understandable how the mythology of the wise owl arose. Mm-hmm. It's those great big eyes, and they have the reason their eyes are really big, obviously, is because they see at night, and so those big eyes create this illusion of wisdom, and so I can't answer why they're tattoos, but I sure can say they are a beautiful, powerful animal that has almost like an archetypal meaning that's imbued in all of us. I think we all recognize the owl as being intense.
Yeah, for sure. And it looks, when you look at an owl, and especially when you see the eyes, it looks like they're pondering. They're putting thoughts together.
It sure does. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of spooky. Now you're right. So other animals, I can't think of another animal that does that. Now, dogs and cats have a tendency for their eyes to kind of look away, but it seems to me if you lock eyes on an owl, man, you better be figuring something out because I don't know if he's going to come at you or what.
He's gonna win the staring contest. Yeah.
Yeah, and doesn't it seem though that there's some sort of thought process going in there? Now, it seems like owls in particular have sort of a larger head than most birds anyway. Do they have a larger brain?
They do not have a larger head. It's very interesting. So and I've seen them. I mean, I've seen owls with their feathers pulled off. They look just like vultures. Their head is the same size as a hawk or a vulture or anything. So they got a kind of a normal size head. What they do have is an incredibly thick coat of feathers. And the reason they have that thick coat of feathers is for silent flight, right? They are muffling their flight by having this thick coat of feathers. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing people say. You go to an owl, it's like a sanctuary, and someone says, "Here, put this owl on your arm." They go, "Oh my God, you're gonna hand me this great big thing?" And it doesn't weigh anything. It's so light. So that's owl. That's an illusion. Mm-hmm. Owls. It's like the fluffy cat when it comes in from the rain. You're like, that is one skinny, scrawny cat. It was like fat before it went out in the rain, and now it looks like a drowned rat. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got a plastic owl hanging out by my chicken coop, man. I'm trying to get them to, scare off the chicken hawks, man. I don't know. Is that a real thing? Do they really do that or no?
Oh, owls will definitely. They're like a lot of animals have, sure. Oh yeah, the plastic owls can work as far as like keeping predators away, small predators like mm-hmm. hawks and things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we talked about the Bohemian Grove, big old owl-looking thing over there. But on the reverse, there's a really small microscopic owl that sits on the ridge of the $1 bill. Why is that out there for?
That's so. This is this is interesting. So, like you get a magnifying glass and you really look close at it. It's an owl. It sure looks like an owl, right? But there's like these kind of curly Q ornamentations all throughout the background of the $1 bill. And you can find that little curly Q shape repeated several points on the $1 bill. So it's part of that. Now, what's interesting to me is the original coin, there's coins minted before this, but the original coin that actually kind of reached the first popular, what would you call it? Like it was the first widely used coin ever was called the owl. And it was Greek. Mm-hmm. It was a silver coin. It was 5 drachma, and it was widely traded. And this is where we get heads and tails. On one side is the owl, which has a little tail on it. And then the other side is Athens, right? So you get a coin from Athens. It's Athena, the namesake of, and also in that little coin with the owl side is a little crescent moon, owl, symbol of night, makes perfect sense, and an olive branch. Olive branch was a symbol of royalty, a symbol of victory in battle. So you have, a military country like ancient Greece. The Greek goddess of war is Athena, as well as Greek goddess of wisdom. So it makes perfect sense. Present day, you look at that little owl, right? So you can dismiss it and say, it's just a little curly Q. It's it's really just barely peeking. If you hold the backside of the $1 bill, I think that's it, in the upper right corner near the numeral 1 mm-hmm. is a little teeny head peeking up over a crescent. Mm-hmm. So we have a crescent, just like the coin, the owl, the ancient coin. And underneath the owl is an olive branch. So we have a crescent, an olive branch, and a little owl, which is, I have to think, someone did that on purpose. They knew just what they were sticking in there. Because those are, like presently, planet Earth, the denomination, if you want to draw a cartoon of money, you draw a $1 bill, right? You draw a dollar bill. In ancient times, you're on a boat somewhere in the Mediterranean, someone says, how would you draw money? And they would draw a little owl coin. So we, in essence, have there's the same symbolism present day on the $1 bill as there was 3,000 years ago on the little owl, the 5 drachma coin.
I see a question or a statement in our YouTube chat. We have 2 chats going on our live YouTube channel. Of course, we're simulcasting on our TuneIn radio program, and we have another live chat on our homepage. But on the YouTube streaming channel that we're broadcasting the show on, somebody said that, they saw a white owl at a cabin in the North Carolina mountains, and they said, but he said my father-in-law who lived below where I seen the owl died shortly thereafter. Let me ask you something. Obviously, owls are an imposing bird. You see one, you notice it, and then most birds just fly by and you don't think half a second on it. But you see an owl, a lot of people stop. Is could it be that there's just an imposing bird that impresses in our mind as different from all the others, or is there really something to that?
There's the question, isn't it? Boy, I mean, that's like, so there's a term archetype, right? You go into the dorm room at some philosophy college, and hang out with the grad students. They're going to sit up all night and try to define what an archetype is, right? It's an elusive term. Plato used the term archetype, and Carl Jung used the term archetype. The implication is that what the word implies is that we have in our genetic memory bank a knowing of what an owl, a deeper meaning of what an owl is, right? So how do you articulate that, right? So perfect example, hero, right? Luke Skywalker is a hero. So when you watch Star Wars, you are watching an archetypal story with an archetypal hero. We know that somewhere deep in our genetic memory bank, right? So that's my sense, is that all of us, I don't know how it works, but all of us have that deep knowing that the owl is something more than just a big bird that flies around at night. It has a mythology. It has an archetypal power.
That kind of knowing, doesn't it also go with good and evil, that a person intrinsically knows something is evil, or they intrinsically know they've done something wrong, even if they haven't been told that they have?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think hopefully we do. I think there's some people who are, have the, their moral compass is so skewed that they don't know right from wrong. But I mean, I think that the vast majority of us know that in our bones. Sure. Yeah. Like, be helpful, help sweet old ladies across the street. I mean, that's obviously good. And then, stand up to tyranny. I think that's hopefully imbued in all of us at a deeper level.
Okay. All right. Here's another question for you. We got a bunch of them in there, so we're just kind of spacing them through. It says, this is from Miss Threeden from YouTube. Any stories of owls helping people?
I got a beautiful one. This woman, she's now a grandmother. It's back in the early 1970s. She was a teenager. She was severely depressed, and she was going to commit suicide. She had it all planned out. She was in her car. She knew the spot she was going to go to. She has in her car, she has a hose and a pillow, right? She's going to take the hose from the tailpipe and bring it into the cab, and she has the pillow so she can lay down in this back seat. And she had a spot all picked out, and it was snowing, and it was nighttime. She'd slowing down to pull into the little turnout that she knew, this little spot in the woods, slowing down to turn. This owl flies up to the windshield, and she says it hovered they locked eyes for 15 seconds.
Wow.
And the owl flew away. She got in her car. She said, this is too powerful. It's a sign. She got in her car. She's never left the car. She turned the car around and went home, and she eventually got over it. Now she's a happy grandmother. So, I mean, she says it as plain as day. She said, that owl saved my life.
Wow. That is so amazing, Mike. I'm glad you relayed that story to us. I know that biblically there's a number of instances where it talks about owls. I think one of them is Leviticus 18 or 11:18, and people have sent me a couple others. And of course, the classic song, I'll Fly Away. So, I mean, hey, maybe I'll Fly Away is really a song about owls, man. I don't know. But it does seem that owls are different from other birds. They just are so contemplative. That's, and then sometimes you see a dog do that too, or maybe even a cat too as well. And they're sitting there and it's like they're thinking about stuff. I'm thinking, well, there's something in there other than just animal instincts. And I think our historically cultures have recognized that, and they've tried to access those animalistic powers. And I wonder if they ever got power, say from, I mean, for, they kill a leopard or drink the leopard's blood. They believe they run faster and such. But I wonder if there's something, did sacrifices of owls ever happen for people to gain their power?
Well, I certainly don't know. There's certainly there's Mongolian shamans put owl feathers. They carry owl feathers as protection, right? So they're going to be like, it's sort of they're warding off evil by having owl feathers. And then I just had another one I just lost it just thinking just now. So you know what is very strange? So they mummies, right? They, like, you talk to an Egyptologist. There's a lot of mummies. They use like tripping over mummies. Like when they got a lot of mummies in a lot of in the Egyptian museums and stuff like that. What they find that when mummies are buried, they are buried with an owl with its head cut off. Nobody knows why. That's weird to me. So there's a mummified person.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a pharaoh. The pharaoh's grandchildren or something like that are mummified. They open the coffin. In the coffin with them is a mummified, all wrapped up, just like in bandages, a mummified owl with its head cut off. Nobody knows why. So if there are so many of these, there must have been a reason for it. So I don't know what that reason was.
See, I want to make a crack here and say, I wonder if the mummy was a Muslim, but I'll just leave that one alone. All right, here we go. This is from from YouTube again, from Azure. Do you think that owls are manifested spirits, perhaps?
Well, people certainly treat them as manifested spirits at times. That story I told earlier about the woman thinking that the owl was her mother and treating it as her mother. That's very common. So you could say straight up, I mean, owls showing up at funerals. I get pictures of a lot? Owls at funerals. Here's I was at this funeral. There was one funeral, it was some civic leader in Florida, and there was a great big funeral, and I got some pictures, and it was very funny because the newspaper author, the writer for the newspaper, said, I really couldn't say this in the newspaper, but I wanted to. And what happened was there was a wake in the public park, and a white owl, flew and landed on the lamppost in the middle of the park. And the writer, the newspaper article writer, said, everyone in the town came out for the civic leader, and they said, everyone talked to the owl as if it was I can't remember the fellow's name, John, as if it was John, And so I don't know if they are spirits, why did that owl show up right then? Mm-hmm. But people certainly treat it as if it was a spirit, like it was embodiment of a spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My wife and I went to every Christmas Day. We go to a local hospital, and we just visit folks. We try to find out if they don't have anybody to visit them, no family and that. And the last time we went, and of course on the way there, we were talking about owls because there's been appearances in our city of snowy owls, and it's like, well, what are they even doing here, And so we were talking about owls, and then when we got to the hospital, we visited a few folks, and one of the nurses says, you've got to go over here and look at this Christmas display. And we said, well, we really don't have time. We should really go. No. And she was very insistent on that. And I said, well, okay, we'll go over and look at your Christmas display. And we went over there, and the whole thing was about snowy owls on the Christmas tree. And I was thinking, you mentioned synchronicity earlier, and I'm thinking that's absolutely synchronicity there. It just was like she was very insistent, as if that was something we had to know or see. And I've never seen a Christmas display with snowy owls. I mean, how often does that happen? But again, that's one of those events that like happened to you. Your eyes pop open, you become ultra sensitive, and your spiritual antenna go up, and you look to see, is there a meaning? Is somebody trying to talk to me, type of thing?
Yeah, and I mean, so there's no association with owls and Christmas. So I mean, but it is a very pretty animal, and it does look really nice on a Christmas card every once in a while. So there certainly owls show up, and there's owl Christmas ornaments. I know that because I have a few on our Christmas tree. But there's nothing. I mean, you just get them at. I mean, there's this. So yeah, so that's and once so. Yeah, I actually have a story of a fellow who it wasn't his true dad. It was his stepfather. He was raised by this man, loved him dearly. The man died instantly of a heart attack. Boom, he just died without any pain. Boom, fell over dead. Ooh, and he was very grateful that his stepfather's passing was so quick. He talked to the doctors about it. He was at the hospital. He left the hospital, walks out. and there's an owl in the grass, like right by the door. There's nobody around. He sits in, and he talked to that owl as if it was his father.
Wow.
And this is very common.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so hey, I actually was I had an outpatient surgery thing. So I'm lying there, and I've got local anesthesia, and they gave me a Valium, so I got real chatty, and I was working on the owl book at the time. So, oh, what's your book about? And I couldn't talk about UFOs,
Okay.
right? Can't talk.
Okay.
So, I'll talk about owls and death, and it's because and I told stories just like I'm telling you now, right? So, and the doctor, she was very nice, and she's like, oh, that's nice, and you could tell she's done this 1,000 times, where she's like, give someone a couple of things of a narcotic, and they get all kind of loopy and start talking away. So,
Okay.
and then she called me back that night, said, what happened just after I walked out, because I was talking about synchronicities and owls, and said the receptionist, without any prompting, started this conversation. She said, what happened? An owl landed on my back porch last night. She said, it did? I said, yeah, my dog just died. I went out there and talked to the owl. And I said, Fluffy, thank you so much for coming back to visit. She did exactly what I had just told while being drugged up during an outpatient, little minor surgery thing. So yeah, this synchronistic stuff is interwoven into my research in a way that it just boggles my mind. I should be used to it at this point, and I'm still fascinated. I'm still astounded.
And owls appear in many videos online. I see them come across my Facebook feed a lot of times. There'd be like a cat and an owl, and
There's some wonderful cat and owl videos.
And I love that. I just love animals anyway. But it's always interesting when you see animals getting along like that. And here's a question from one of our chats. It says, do different colors of owls mean things? Of course, we mentioned the snowy owl, obviously white, but we have others. There's one of our background that we grabbed from your book and various ones. So do colors mean anything?
This is very vague, but I could say that there's a anecdotal theme where if you see a brown owl, so there's really only two colors of owls. You can get a white owl, which are rare, right? There's only a few white owls. They show up anywhere in the world. You have snowy owls, which are in northern latitudes, all around the globe. So you can be in northern Russia, you can be in northern Canada, and snowy owls. They'll occasionally migrate south, and people can see them, and in the middle of America. It's not common, but it happens. And they are a migrating owl. There's not many owls that migrate the way a snowy owl does. So, and then the other white owl that we have is the barn owl, which is all over there is barn owls everywhere, Europe and here and all over. Now, what there's white would be if the owl was delivering a message, a white owl would be delivering a spiritual message, and a brown owl or gray owl would be delivering like a practical message. And that's coming from Native American totem lore. That's coming from Native American lore. That's not quite universal, but I pay close attention when someone sees a white owl.
My wife and I were in the Ozarks, and we were driving on the road, and there's this horse by the side of the road, and as we passed it turned and looked directly at me, and you talk about locking eyes. That's probably one of the few times I've ever felt like I've actually locked eyes with an animal, and I thought, well, that animal either knows who I am. I had this feeling, this gut feeling, like it knows who I am. It knows I'm I'm not hyping myself, but it knows I'm basically a good person. Love animals and that type of thing, and try to have a good heart and try to make a difference in the world for good. But I felt like absolutely I locked on eyes with that horse. But my question is, you said that the owls sometimes they appear, they like light on your front porch or something. When an animal sort of does that, regardless, whatever kind of animal kind of does that, but we'll stick with the owls in this case, is it because they know they're in relation to or in the same sphere, or they're in the same universe as us? They're trying to communicate, or they feel something that it's safe for them to come there, and it's an acknowledgement to the person, to the human.
I cannot answer that. That's the mystery, isn't it? So this is where I struggle, right? So I can't answer why it happens. All I can do is take 2 steps back and say, what would be the lesson? Right. So, like in the UFO realm, right? You go to a UFO investigator, he's going to ask, okay, what time of day was it? Where's the closest airport? Can you draw a picture of it? You go to a shaman, right? You go to knock on the door of the teepee, and the shaman, and you say, oh, I had this experience with a big metal craft. And the shaman would say, what was going on in your life before you saw this big metal craft? What was going on? What changed afterwards? How has your spirituality changed? How has your dream life changed? So there's this. You almost have to take a few steps back and not. I've given up trying to understand why the owls. What makes the owl? What's the mechanism that makes them show up? All I know is they show up, and then I'll go crazy, right? I'll never get an answer to why they're showing up, but I can dance around what the answer might be, or what the symbolism is, or what the clues that people are being confronted with when they see an owl, and often in relationship to UFOs.
Now, I like the terminology there, a clue, because anytime I see something like that, whether it be individual synchronicity, or, you're talking about, say, snowy owls, and then one all of a sudden it's like right there, stuffed snowy owls, or, these kinds of things. Then I really like what you just said, that I see it as a clue. I've never described it that way, but I would say it's a clue that something is different in my walk. Something has appeared on my path. And I feel like it's up to me to try to understand it. And I don't know if I gather a deep message from it, but it's a clue that something else is going on. I like that. In general, Mike, mainly concerning with the owls, but when you're dealing with animals in general, they seem to do things without evil intent. But you get to the human species, the human animal, and there's obviously evil intent. You mentioned it earlier. We were talking about the heart. Not everybody is so good. Why is that? Or do I have it all wrong?
I think that people are astray. People have wandered astray in some way. I'm very cautious to say anything because this isn't really my avenue of expertise. But I feel like so my sense is the vast, vast, vast majority of the population is just filled with goodness. And then there's a small percentage, oftentimes, the small percentage might be, controlling countries and controlling, giant corporations. But the small percentage just astray from the simplest, the golden rule, let's say,
Yeah. Even the smallest rudimentary goodness, they've
figured out a way to ignore it. Yeah.
I hate to end the first hour like that, but hey, we got your website in the background. We're getting ready to go to our 5-minute break. Mike, what can people find at MikeCleland.com?
MikeCleland.com, you get there's a series of things you can click on, and any one of those things can click. I've got a bunch of things. I did some outdoor work. I wrote some books on backpacking, and there's also a big owl. There's a lot of owl stuff. What each of those do is take you to a different website, So, yes. And I have a blog, which that MikeCleland.com will take you right to the blog too. And the blog is started in 2009. Good God, that's 9 years ago. And now I have, I don't know how many posts I have, but a lot of UFO research and a lot of my own experiences are archived there. And also a lot of, I've archived a lot of podcasting there.
Okay. All right, Mike, I tell you what, turn your mic down and I'll turn you back up over here in about 9:06.
Great.
All right, everybody, you're watching and/or listening to the Edge television broadcast. Remember, this broadcast will begin to replay directly after the show, and we'll put the extracted audio in a podcast form. We'll upload it to our TuneIn radio platform as well, and extract the high-definition video and put it into our YouTube channel and on our homepage. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We have a short video for you. We'll be right back.
Oops. Hey, everything's good, but yeah, this has been a fun talk so far.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, man, I think maybe an owl got in your system or something. I don't know. Or an owl spirit. And I just want to start with that right there. The spirit of the owl. Is anybody, now, of course, this YouTube stuff, you can go out there and you see people claim they have spirit of animals. Has anybody claimed they actually have a spirit of an owl? Maybe they have a fetish of some sort. You mentioned owl feathers and somebody, but is there anything creepy like that going on out there?
Well, there's certainly people who collect little owl knickknacks. And when here's the thing, you write a book about owls, people are going to send you owl mugs and owl, refrigerator magnets. And so I got all that
Okay.
stuff at this
Okay.
point. That's it's
Okay.
arriving now. So,
Uh,
and then there's also, I mean, people will say that the owl is my spirit animal.
okay. Okay.
So
Well,
I mean, I get that a lot, and so,
well,
I mean,
you.
that's in certain spiritual traditions, that's, people have a spirit animal the same way, in the jungles of Brazil and stuff like that, that people are going to have a spirit animal. And it's a little, for a Westerner, um, when I stepped into this stuff and started looking at this thing, I kind of, my toes would curl in my shoes a little bit when I would hear that. I have loosened up a lot since then, and I
Well,
listen
you.
very carefully
Well,
when people say that kind of thing at this point.
Mike, you might be the first person I know that has Christmas tree owl ornaments, man. Are you okay?
I'm great. There's probably two of them, but we do have them here at the house. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there's a lot of ornaments on the tree. Two or three of them might be little owls.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, you get a pass there. You're good. All right, here we go. And let's get some more stories or more questions coming to you. Um, and this is I kind of mentioned it tongue in cheek about Islam, but is any owl connected to Islam or moon worship?
Well, there's certainly owls connected to the moon, and that's just because it's at night. It's a night bird. So yeah, so there's a lot of old ancient imagery of owls and a moon side by side, and that goes well before Islam. That's thousands of years stretching back in time. And I can't speak to Islam at all as far as the owls. I do know that I think it was found in Turkey, which I'm not actually sure if that's Islam, but there's a beautiful old terracotta plaque. It's like a little tile. It's not that big, but it's many thousands of years old, and it's one of the it's a image of, they're not actually sure who it is, but it has this. It's a woman with wings and owl feet talons.
Mm-hmm.
She's standing on two lions, and she's flanked by two owls. And it's thought to be Lilith, which shows up in the Bible, as in some versions of the Bible, as like an alternate to Eve, like an evil spirit, basically, in some lore. And so so this is and also like almost like a vampire type folklore around Lilith, flying at night and stealing babies and things like that.
Mm-hmm. This is actually from our moderator, Jade. How do owls relate to UFOs?
That is the question, isn't it? So the first book is almost 400 pages long. The second book is over 250 pages long. That works to just, when you do the math, it's a little shy of, it's close to 700 pages of that question. Why do owls relate to UFOs? So I have been wrestling with this question over and over and over again. What I found, this is the story I told, right? So I saw those owls, and I heard the voice in my head that said, this has something to do with the UFOs. So when I started to look into my own UFO experiences, I asked everyone. I would say, listen, I'd talk to UFO investigators. I'd talk to people who had the first person contact experience. And I would ask them the same question. Do you have any odd experiences with owls? And they would say, that's funny. You should ask. No one has ever asked me that. I have this really weird owl story. And then I started collecting them, and I got so many that it was like, whatever, like taking the cork out of the dam, and then the whole dam crumbles.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been collecting these stories. So here's the typical one. This is some, in one form or another, I've heard this over and over again. Guy is camping in the desert. Him and his buddy are camping in the desert. They got a little campfire. They're looking up at the beautiful stars. They're just amazed. And they look over, and there's a owl on top of this tall cactus looking right down at him. They both get the same feeling, like this is eerie. There's really something ominous. The owl looks at him for a little bit and flies off. Seconds later, this triangle craft floats right over them and then zooms down the canyon that they're in. And I sat with this fellow, and he tried to describe how this craft, this triangle-shaped craft, made no noise at all, how it hovered and kind of followed the contours of the land. He was very clear that this was not made in an airplane factory. So this is, I have that over and over and over again. People like they look at an owl and then the owl flies off and they see a UFO. It's almost always the owl first and then the UFO. I have a few where it's the opposite, where someone will see a UFO and then shortly afterwards they'll see an owl. This one woman, and she living in Brazil in a tall apartment complex, and she is on her back porch and she looks, and there's a like a flying saucer. Like there's a building across from her and it flies past her, and she looks and it goes behind the building in front of her, and it should come out the other side, right? Just the direction of travel. It should just like pass by it and come out the other side. It didn't come by the other side. And then she kind of made a joke. She said, "Okay, guys, where are you?" Right then, 2 owls flew and landed on her back porch with her back deck, her little pet or a balcony. And they lived there for like a month. And so she was like befriended these owls. Mm-hmm. They were nice. She loved these owls. So here we have someone who sees a UFO. The UFO disappears. She says, like, okay, where are you? Like, where'd you go? Boom. 2 owls land on her back porch and live there for months. This is not unusual. These are the kinds of stories I'm collecting.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Hey, I've got a question coming. This is from our Fast Blast email client, Kevin in Massachusetts. Some ancient tribes and abductees say the owl can shapeshift and give wisdom and warning. What do you think about that?
Well, so this is the shape. So some tribes say shapeshift. I've talked to folks in in the UFO research community, right? So here's a story. I got this over and over and over again. Someone's driving late at night. And they turn a corner and there's this great big tall owl in the road. 4-foot tall owl. They pull right up to the owl, and the owl can look over the hood of their car. And then they move around it and they drive home, and they get home and they're 2 hours late. What happened? What happened to those 2 hours? Let's say they go through hypnotic regression. I'm kind of jumbling together a few stories to make one, hero story, let's say. Okay. So they the hypnotherapist says, "Okay, now so describe this owl." And then they'll say, "Well, it's bald and it has big black eyes and it's got a tight-fitting uniform on and it's got this chalky gray skin." I think it's an owl. And I don't think it's an owl. So the implication is that they have a memory of seeing an owl, but something happened, some sort of, let's say, psychic projection has been put into their consciousness. The observer is confronted with a gray alien, and what they see and what they remember is an owl. Mm-hmm. So this is remarkably common, and that's referred to in the literature as a screen memory. Now, I talked to some native people from the Zuni tribe, and they treat spirituality different than we in the West do. So they're tapped into it in a different way than we are. And they say, you know what, we're getting a lot of reports of 4-foot tall owls. Wow. And I said, this is exactly what's showing up in the UFO reports. 4-foot tall owls. There is no 4-foot tall owls. There's no 3-foot tall owls, right? So if someone says they saw 4-foot tall owls, something else is going on. So I said, like, how does your culture treat that? And they said, oh, it's shapeshifting. It's a spirit of some sort that has shapeshifted into a 4-foot tall owl, where the UFO researcher will say it's an alien that uses psychic projection to mask their own identity and deceive the observer.
You mentioned 4-foot tall, and when you were telling that story, Mike, I was thinking about the Mothman. I'm wondering if they said that thing would fly next to a car or jump in on a car. I wonder, could that have been a 4-foot owl right there?
You know what? That is right in John Keel's book. They had, like, people were saying, like, maybe it was an owl, maybe it was a big owl. So there was a dead owl, big owl, found out in a field, and they got a bunch of townspeople. Right, this is right in the height of the flap. They got a bunch of townspeople, and they went out to showed this owl, and all of them looked at this little thing and said, no way, that was not what we saw. But that's what the debunkers will say. Well, they probably just saw an owl flying alongside their car. Mm-hmm. And then you talk to the actual witnesses and you show them an owl and they're like, no way. I have some amazing stories of an owl flying alongside a car. Mm-hmm. So people driving at night. This fellow's name is Joe. Joe's driving at night, him and his buddy, and they look up and there's a little, him and the two people in the front seat late at night, they're in their 20s, and there's they're all driving home late at night and they're dropping people off. So there's a country road. They look up and there's a dot in the sky, and both people in the front seat are like, it's dropping below the cloud line, and then it goes back up, and they're like, oh my God, that was a UFO. We just saw a UFO. Moments later, there's an owl flying alongside their car. Now, this owl flies in a way that doesn't make any sense. It's flying, so it's facing the window of the car, the side window, as the car is driving 50 miles an hour. So this owl is staring into the window, car is going 50 miles an hour, and the owl is staring in at them. And everyone in the car screams at the same time. So so my sense is that owl, that's no owl flies like that. They said it was defying all laws of physics, the way it was flying. Right. And so what really happened? I mean, that's a scary story. And so they see a UFO, they're confronted with an owl. It seems about the size of a real owl, but it is flying in a way that just is illogical, and everyone in the car screams and is overwhelmed with panic at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. That's another interesting story. And I tell you what, I was going down I was traveling in another state, and I kept seeing this. What was that one bird kept seeing on the rail?
Hawks.
I don't know if it's what kind of probability there is, Mike Cullen, but I saw 15 hawks sitting on split rail fences along I-70 outside of Indianapolis. I mean, as it was going by, it was unbelievable. I was thinking, is this like hawk country, or they all having this is their favorite place? But I mean, that turned my head right there. Now, sometimes I could actually mistake a hawk for an owl, but it looked like a hawk to me anyway. So I think I got it right. But I mean, there was at least 15 of them as I went, maybe in 20 miles. I was thinking, how is it every hawk in the whole state is sitting on these fence rails? I don't know.
So hawks migrate. So they could have been just showing up, and they migrate in clusters. They're not solitary migrations. So there could be you could talk to an ornithologist or a bird person who might be able to give a better answer than I do. My question, like where you take off my ornithologist hat and I put on my shaman hat, and I ask you what was going on in your life. What anything going on leading up to those sightings? Anything changing after those sightings?
That's a very good question. I'll tell you what, Mike, great to be on your show. And I like to say that, let me think here. I was,
I mean, maybe there's nothing. So, but it's a question I asked.
No, honestly, no, I'm thinking I've never considered that. And let me think here. I was extremely happy. Lottie-don down the road. I was one with nature and with nature's God, I suppose. There's 3 chapters in the second book called Owls and Gratitude. Oh.
And I am convinced, I mean, I can't prove this. This is just my gut talking, my heart talking. I am convinced that, so there's 3 separate stories that make up the last 3 chapters. So it's Owls and Gratitude, parts 1, 2, and 3. It's Don, Joe, and Kelly. 3 different people tell 3 different stories of an owl. The stories are so similar that these are very subtle stories. And I'm very proud of the last 3 chapters. But what they had in common was they all said thank you in advance. They were like out in a beautiful environment, and they said thank you. This is really beautiful. I appreciate being out here in nature. And they all saw an owl. The flavor of those owl stories is so eerie and so similar that I'm struck with. So that what you just said there, you were, that feeling of gratitude for being in a beautiful place that shows up. That to me is very real, and it has a very real power.
Wow. I'm going to keep an eye on that there. I think they also got a hoot owl. And by the way, let me see here. I'm not sure if I have the audio. I don't know if you heard it, but I thought an owl.
I heard a couple little hoots there. I was
Okay.
trying to figure out outside. I was looking at because I have a one of those little arms, that holds the microphone,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes it squeaks and
Oh.
it makes that kind of noise. And I was like, oh my gosh, my thing is squeaking. So
Oh, no, I was kind of trying to surprise to see if you'd catch that. All right.
I did catch it. Yeah. So
All right. Look, here's now right here. That's two owls talking back and forth.
yeah.
No, that was a different owl there.
That's a different owl.
I don't think he likes what's going on. I don't know what's he
So
doing.
owls have different calls. Yes, so owls have different calls. They make funny squawks. Yeah.
All right, then
So
we
I
have
think that was who's awake me too. That's either a barred owl or a great horned owl.
great horned owl is what it was.
Yeah.
And what about this one here? This is one I was playing on you. I was going to try to cheer you up.
Is it a western screech owl?
Yep, man, you are the owl expert. Well, I tell you what, man, since we've got owls in the studio, I think it's bringing us both good luck.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's good luck. So if my sense is that the owl, if you see an owl, you are confronted with a challenge, right? So I saw those owls. I'm putting myself in this. I saw those.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to put the owl to sleep. Hang on. Owl, go to sleep for a second. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that was thinking that's a saw-whet owl. So owls, I saw the owls. I had the voice in my head said that this has something to do with UFOs. I have been confronted with the biggest challenge of my life, which has been putting together these books, doing this research. An owl is not a light totem, right? It's not the hummingbird, right? Hummingbird is like, oh, what a nice day, kind of totem. And the owl isn't like that. Owl is a call to confront a challenge. Now, there's nothing wrong with a challenge. A challenge isn't inherently bad, right? It can be a lot of work, but it's a challenge. So yes, and it's also so the guy goes to meditate. He goes into the field to meditate. There's no UFOs in this story. He's French Canadian, and he loves to meditate outside. So he stands up before meditating and he says, I want to help with the upliftment of mankind. I want to be of service. I want to help with the upliftment of humankind, right? He sits down to meditate. Meditates in the sun. It's lovely. He opens his eyes. He's like kneeling in the tall grass in this big field. And he sees these ravens, these crows, all circling in one spot. He stands up and he sees that there's a snowy owl. Now, owls and ravens are notorious enemies. They'll harass each other mercilessly. And most often it's the ravens that'll bunch up and harass an owl. Well, owls are usually totally oblivious to it. But, and so he asks, so like if I'm the shaman, right? I ask him, so what were you doing right before you saw this owl? And he said, I want to help with the upliftment of mankind. And then he meditates, stands up, and sees an owl. It doesn't get any plainer than that for me.
When I see ravens myself, I have a tendency to think of them as kind of a mean bird.
Well, they certainly ravens, and they do what they do for other. They fly around and they'll which it's the animal kingdom. I can't pass judgment on it, but it sure seems mean to me. They'll pop the eggs. They'll break the eggs of other birds to try to keep the population of other birds down. So, but at the same time, they're very smart. There's all kinds of YouTube videos where the people have very simple puzzles and they figure out the raven solves these puzzles. And they also have their own, totem lore. They are the intermediary between this world and the beyond. It's very similar to the owl.
There's a song out there by the Alan Parsons Project called The Raven. And I think there's a few more songs out there with ravens in it. And I don't remember any that have the owl. Are there any songs that you know
There
of?
are. I'm drawing a complete blank on owl songs right now. There's a funny old Fats Waller song about an owl.
Let me ask you something, though. We're talking about part of our conversation is dealing with the UFOs owls and the deeper reality. But we had a guest on a program and talking about. Let me get her name here. It was Sibylla Irwin. She's a curator at a Bigfoot museum, and she claims, and other people who've been on this program claim, that there is UFO activity where people sense or see Bigfoots. And I'm wondering, I don't know if they're saying that they're materializing like a Star Trek way from the ship down here and then going, gathering some goods and going back up. But if that's the case, the connection between UFOs and Bigfoots, man, could we possibly have some owls driving around in UFOs?
I don't know if they're in the UFOs, so I don't know if they're actually in the UFOs, but there's of what I am convinced after 11 years, let's say I've been doing this, because that started full bore in 2006. It's 2018 now. So that's 12 years. Good grief. That's 12 years later. So a dozen years I've been immersed in this research. I don't have an answer. What I can certainly say is I recognize there's a connection. Like I feel strong. I feel like I got no problem saying there is a connection between UFOs and owls. What that connection is anybody's guess. So I don't think the UFOs are on board. There have been reports of people seeing giant hairy Sasquatch on board a UFO, and then that's also very common that UFOs and Sasquatch are seen in conjunction. It's very interesting because there's the UFO and Bigfoot community, right? There's people who like research Bigfoots, and there's people who research UFOs. They do not overlap, right? They hardly overlap. And then there's people, if there's parts of the Bigfoot community that would say, like I had this report come in. It was a Bigfoot sighting. It had to do with the UFO. They would crumble that up and throw it in the wastebasket and go, well, that's ridiculous. As part of the UFO community, they would be saying, oh, I got this UFO report. Wait a minute, there's a Bigfoot in here. They would take that report, crumble it up, and throw it in the wastebasket. So I think we should open that wastebasket up and flatten those things out and re-examine those. So that's but I've heard a handful of stories where they're both seen together.
Well, Mike Cullen, we got our moderator Jay said there's a song called let me see if she put it in there. It is Burl Ives has one, Night Owl. James Taylor, the Night Owls, Little River Band. So Night Owl Blues by the Lovin' Spoonful. Right there, man. You got to put those songs in your playlist.
Yeah. Well, but at the same time, right? So this is it makes me. So I'll walk down the street with someone, right? Walk down the main street of the town, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, look an owl! Look, there's an owl T-shirt. Oh my God, there's an owl lunchbox. Oh my God, someone's got there's an owl poster in that window there." And I'm like, I gotta okay, take a deep breath. They're everywhere.
Yeah, I'd like to have an owl bobblehead doll. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. I mean,
I don't have one, but I'm certain they're out there somewhere.
They're out there.
I think owls are right behind dogs and cats, basically, in my opinion.
Hey, by the way, I've got a screenshot of the messengers, owl synchronicity, and the UFO abductee. What's the difference between that and the second book, which I now put up in my background, which says Stories from the Messengers?
Okay, good. So the first book, I wrote an essay, right? I wrote a magazine-length essay. It was 40 pages long, roughly. And people read this essay, and they were like, "You got to write a book. This is really interesting." Do you know Nick Redfern?
Yes, he'd been on the show. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So Nick Redfern contacted me right away. Said, "You have to write a book." I'm like, "Damn!" Like I kind of knew when I was like. So I was like, "Okay, I'm going to write this book." I've written actually that's not. I had written a couple small camping instructionals. These were easy. They were breezy. They just flowed out of me. This book was work. Putting this book together. So the original essay was 40 pages long. The book is about 400 pages long. So I took that original essay and multiplied it by 10. And someone described the first book as juggling the hot potatoes, right? Because I try to figure out every conceivable aspect I can look at it. I look at it from this side, and I is it shamans? Is it UFOs? Is it dreams? And I go through dreams. You know what? Actually, owls show up a lot. People taking mushrooms, often in a sacred kind of shamanic way. People take mushrooms. They see owls. So I just was struggling with all this stuff. Where are these owls showing up? Owls and death. So I look at the aspect and owls in pop culture, owls in conspiracy, my own owl experiences. I document all of those in that big fat book. And you kind of come away with this, right? You kind of like you look at the dots in a newspaper, right? You put your face really close to the photograph in an old newsprint newspaper photograph, and it's just a bunch of dots, and you back away, and it's like, oh, there's an image there. And that's my sense, is the first book is kind of like, oh, like there's all these divergent stories, but you let them, you sift through them, and there's a deeper story that emerges, and that deeper story would be that the owl would be the totem of, one way to look at it is the totem of the transformational process. People who see owls change, right? They see, I changed. I saw those owls. My life took a sharp turn, and my old life vanished, and my new life was thrust upon me. Like I say it, I did not choose owls. Owls chose me.
Wow.
That book was, I was a tense person at the beginning of the writing of that book, because I was dealing with a lot of synchronicities. I was trying to research my own UFO experiences. I was a tense person. The writing of that book, which took about 4 years, I changed. I'm a much calmer person. The second book, what happened when I wrote the first book is I would talk to people on the phone. Someone have an owl story, boom, we could write the owl story up in a paragraph. But then you talk to them on the phone, and the phone call's like 7 hours long, and they tell me this stuff about UFOs and dreams and prophetic stuff and psychic visions and near-death experience. There's like, so what I was confronted with is that there is a lot of people who have these experiences. It's a novel that needs to be written in a way. So the story is 19 chapters. The second book, Stories from the Mess. To tell these stories as fully as possible. I was working with an editor, and she would say, well, should we leave this part out? I'm like, no, let's leave that in. We can write it, let's leave it in. We have to leave it in because that's the premise of the book, is to include all the weirdness that surrounds these to it, that you can only kind of tap into if you get to hear the complete story. So that was my hope, was to tell those complete stories. So the second book is 19 stories. Each story is kind of complex, right? They're not easy to tell because there's so many synchronicities, and there's kind of an illogic to some of these stories that are illogical in a way. The first book is my trying to I create an argument. I create an idea, owls and UFOs are connected. And then I spend 400 pages trying to back that up.
Wow.
And I'm very proud of that first book. I'm proud of both books. And they actually sit together very nicely on the shelf. You don't have to read them in any order. You can read either book first, and they Oh, did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm back. It seemed like the audio dropped out for a second.
Oh, just a couple seconds there.
Yeah.
Did you lose me?
I really can't tell, but we got you back on the line there. So yeah,
Good, okay.
we've got the gist of it. I've been showing those book covers. Let me ask you something. There's a guy out there named Giorgio Tertullio who believes that there are ancient aliens, and so he wears a little ancient alien-looking spaceship on his lapel. Michael, when you dress up, do you have a little owl pin on your lapel?
I don't have a little owl pin on and I'm very cautious to start putting owl bumper stickers on my car or anything like that. So I don't have a little owl bumper. What do I have? No, I don't have anything. I don't have any owl tattoos. I don't have any, there's some owl magnets on them. I have some very pretty, someone I got for Christmas. My partner, Andrea, gave me sculpture that's downstairs on the wall. It's very lovely. It's very simple. So
okay. Question came in. It says, how far north do the owls go?
They go way far north, but the problem is they got to eat, right? So the snowy owl eats mice and lemmings, right? The little rodents that in the northern latitudes. Winter is 6 months long, right? So it's time to eat. In wintertime, boy, there's snow everywhere. All the lemmings are migrating, hibernating or living under the snow.
Mm-hmm.
So they migrate and come south. So there is. I can't put a line of latitude on the map. I would have to kind of look at the map, but yeah. So their territory goes way up into northern Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and northern Russia and northern Finland and all across the globe there on that circumference.
Okay, I see in our YouTube chat somebody said one of my friends was talking to God and an owl appeared. I wonder if there was a connection.
I have that a lot. I have that. I told you this story in the first 5 letters of her name. She's giving me her definition of God, and owls appear. I have that a lot. Where I have a story with a guy who saw one of those 4-foot tall owls. Right, so he's one of these guys, and it's funny because his wife never believed him. Mm-hmm. He drew a picture. He said, "I saw this owl, it's 4 foot tall," mm-hmm. and I did a presentation at a conference, at a UFO conference, and he was there in the audience with his wife, and I brought out onto stage, it's cardboard, but I made it myself just to get the point across. This measured it with the measuring tape, 4 foot tall. I made it out of cardboard. I painted it. It's a 4 foot tall cardboard owl, and I brought it on the stage, and
About the cutout
owl. Guy in the audience sees this cutout owl, 4 foot tall owl. He flinches. His wife recognized that, like, he was like emotional, shaking. So his wife came up to me and said, "I never believed him. I never believed my husband before." So when you showed that picture, like, now I believe him, because he responded so powerfully to that image of the owl in the road, as well as that 4 foot tall cardboard owl. Now, this guy has a story of, he's like in a state of turmoil. Here's a guy who's like seen a 4 foot tall owl. If you follow that thread, I can't say for certain, but he may have had UFO contact experiences. Goes out to his car. He's standing in the middle of the street, totally alone, early morning. He's walking from around the side of the car to get in the driver's seat. He hears this thwap in the middle of the street. Turns around. The only way and there's a Bible laying open in the middle of the street. It's like, there's nobody there. There's nobody could have thrown it. It would have had to fallen from outer space or something like that. The Bible lands next to him, picks it up, and he's documented it, like what actually page it's on. I can't remember at the time right now, but it was very relevant to him. Mm-hmm. Now, and this is something that actually shows up in. So I can't remember what your question was. Like, I think it was like Christianity or religion and God, or finding God showing up in the context of owls. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it shows up.
Wow. The adage, a little birdie told me, that's actually a spinoff of a verse in the Bible. I'm sure somebody in one of our live chats can give that to us. Let's get to another question here as we get toward the end of our broadcast here. It says, do owls sing? I mean, they obviously hoot, and they communicate, but at any point, because there are particular birds that clearly are singing. So do any owls sing?
They are not songbirds. No, they squawk. And you know what it is the bigger owls hoot, right? So you get these big, beautiful owls. They hoot. They got this beautiful sound. I live in a place with barred owls. Oh my gosh. That is the richest, the most beautiful, eerie noise that you could possibly ring through the woods at night. I hear it a lot. And there's nothing mystical about it. I just live in a place with a lot of barred owls. The smaller the owls, they don't make hoots at all. They make beeps and chirps and tweets and stuff like that. They sound like little, sick ducks or something. So, they are not songbirds. So the bigger the owl, the bigger the voice, and the smaller the owl, the more likely they are to squeak or tweet or something.
Mm-hmm. I had a while ago. I had a slide of owls that actually burrow in the ground. I thought,
burrowing owls, yeah.
What is up with that?
Well, they don't do the burrowing. They're taking over someone else's burrow. They're taking over, like, usually a prairie dog burrow or something like that. So,
prairie dog.
And then burrowing owls are one of the few owls that actually hunt in the day. Mm-hmm. And burrowing owls also are very funny because owls don't usually stand up tall on their hind legs, right? They kind of plop down. They kind of squat down. Burrowing owls stand up tall. So they look like an owl on flamingo legs. It's a very funny to see the burrowing owls. They don't stand the way like we're used to seeing a normal owl kind of plop down they have their full legs. They're just bent up into their furry, hidden, their legs are hidden away.
Mm-hmm. So they take over the prairie dogs.
Well, any kind of like rodent that would they would take over a den, like, yeah, and then live in someone else's hole.
Yeah.
So they don't actually dig the holes.
Yeah, I got a picture of a couple of them there. They're just gorgeous animals. I just love them. Now I'm kind of freaked out though, because you said in the first hour, Mike, that if you take all the feathers away, they're gonna look like a vulture or some kind. You know, like a little small head. Now I don't even want to see that.
Yeah, they're certainly cute and fluffy when they like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's an illustration in the first book I show of like a kind of outline of the fluffiness, and they kind of look like this vulture underneath. You know, well, so does a. I mean, any big bird like that. I mean, an eagle looks like a vulture if you peel. I mean, the only reason a vulture is because a vulture's head doesn't have any feathers on it, so they have that kind of ugly, wrinkly thing there. So.
Okay. I got your book, Ultralight Backpacking
You do?
Tips. Yeah, I've got it right there.
Wait, but good right on for you.
And I mean, I like to get out with myself, and I'm definitely an avid camper. And I want to ask if the connection of owls, if one were to say go out on a trail somewhere specifically looking for an owl, would one be specifically liable to see a UFO too by the act of trying to seek out the owl?
So what you're saying is, can intention influence the result?
Correct. Yes.
I say yes, the intention can influence the result. I think the intention has to be pure, and I think the intention has to be kind of heartfelt. So yeah, I think so. And also I think that synchronicity is playful in a way, so I mean, who knows, like you're gonna go out into the woods and say, I want to see a UFO, and then who knows, the next person that comes and crosses you on the trail might have a UFO t-shirt on or something like that. So it's going to be playful. It might not you might ask a question, it might not get answered in the way you want, but my sense is yes. And obviously it's not 100% of the time, so I hope you don't don't send me letters like I went out in the woods and cast my intention. I didn't see a UFO.
Right.
But my sense is yes. I think intention is very powerful and can have an influence on you can get results from strong intention.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had a lot of synchronicities in my life, and I'm definitely a believer in that. So as I said earlier in the first hour, when something happens like that, my spiritual antenna goes up, and like if after the show I hear an owl, I'm going to think, okay, absolute confirmation that you were destined and destiny called you to the show this particular night for this particular reason to talk about this particular thing. But we're talking about your book, Ultralight Backpacking Tips, and may not necessarily be tonight's topic, but hey, give me a couple tips on that, man.
Number one, get a scale. Go to the office supply store, spend $19.99 on a little postal scale, and then get a scale and weigh all your camping gear, one piece after another, and then write it down. And then what you do is when most of the time you go and you're like, hey, let's go camping. You just pull out some totes and stuff that you have in the garage and some cardboard boxes, and you stuff it in your backpack and you walk down the trail and your pack is heavy. I advocate, don't do that. Sit at a desk, put on your thinking cap, have a little calculator there. You go and there's not that many things in your backpack. There's about 50 things. Doesn't take long to weigh 50 things and write a list of 50 things. I mean, that's like everything. That's like the spoon, that's the lighter. So some of those things are pretty, like you're talking like a half an ounce for a vast number of those 50 things. But formalizing that process will make your backpack plummet. A scale and a calculator. Now a spreadsheet, if you're good at spreadsheets, go ahead and that's a shoe-in to you'll do great. But you can do the same thing on a ledger pad. Wow.
Okay, that's a good tip now.
Yeah, that one works. That one people, and then and then separate your wants from needs, right? I want this big fancy knife. I want it. I love it. I bought it. It's beautiful. It's a big fancy knife. It's got a can opener. It's got a little fish scaler. It's and then separate that. Take the tiniest little pen knife you can imagine, right? So how often you're not going to fend off a mountain lion with no matter how big your knife is. It's not going to help you at all. So, out in the backcountry in the mountains, what are you going to need? What do you really need a knife for? Cut a piece of string, cut the cheese at dinner time. So yeah, just separate your wants from needs. Scrutinize every single piece.
So I take it when you initially began to backpack, were you the heavy toters?
Oh, I was as heavy as they could come. I'm surprised I can stand upright right now. I'm 55 years old, and I think I lost a few inches on my years of hiking with a big backpack. So And then there came a day when I did illustrations for a book called Lighten Up by an author named Don Ladigan. It's referenced in that book. And so he was advocating this ultralight thing, and I followed all his rules, and I got this little pack, and I put everything in the pack, and I went out in the mountains. I mean, 10 steps down the path, I was like, oh, I'll never camp the same way again. This is it. This is, here's the number one. Wear running shoes. Just wear running shoes. Don't wear boots.
Oh.
The reason you have boots on when you hike is because you have a big pack. Just wear running shoes.
Okay.
And then everything is built around that. Like, I can only hike with running shoes if I have a light pack. So then I can just make sure your pack is light.
Mm-hmm. What's your longest backpack trip?
35 days.
Wow.
That's 35 days leaving the car, then returning.
Look,
that was in a mountaineering environment. That was up in Alaska. So that was not a lightweight backpacking trip.
Okay. It scares the hell out of me to be thinking about being in the middle of a forest completely black out there. Is anything, what's out there in the middle of the night where you can't see, Mike? Is there Bigfoot back there, lions? What? I mean,
I've never seen Bigfoot. I've seen lots of bears. I lived in grizzly bear country. I've seen lots of bears. I had a moose get caught on, like, I was sleeping under a tarp, right? It was a real simple little tarp. I had a moose, a big fat moose, and you're laying on the ground. Like, do you think they look big when you're like they're off on the side of the road? Like, wait till you're lying on the ground and they see the moose and it got kind of caught in the strings of the tent. It didn't phase it at all. I mean, it just was walking past, but it kind of. So the whole tent's rattling, and I'm looking in the bright moonlight of this moose walking right next to me. I honestly, there was absolutely no danger at all, but it did get your heart going.
I imagine so. Hey, in the first hour, in the opening dialogue, Mike, you said that you heard a voice. Who do you think that voice was?
I mean, was it me? Was it some higher part of myself? That's it. Was it was it like alien transmission? The same way that, you can you have like a walkie talkie. There's somebody like talking at the little dashboard of their flying saucer somewhere up in the stratosphere, like tapping right into my brain. Or was it some higher part of myself? I have no good answer for that. But the message was crystal clear. So whatever it was, I was tuned in perfectly. Like you have your little walkie-talkie and you turn the little squawk button, and every once in a while it comes in perfectly clear, crystal clear communication. That's what that message was.
I was listening to one of your audiobooks, and I just put over there, in my background, put the Hidden Experience blog and audio interviews, that type of thing. And I heard you mention the Bible a couple times. Did you ever read the Bible like in its entirety, or do you just hear stories from various excerpts from it?
I have read the New Testament in its entirety. I was raised Lutheran. And I read the New Testament because I was so interested in mythology. And I was like, well, I kind of like have, I went to church growing up and went to catechism growing up and stuff like that. And the church I went to was this the late 60s, early 70s, and guitars and stuff like that in the service and stuff. So, and it was Lutheran and very, very pleasant and simple. And there was no hell and brimstone or anything like that. So, and so I ended up reading the New Testament. This is probably 20 years ago and stuff. And I was really like, it was like, I recognized like, oh, that's where that phrase came from. Oh, that's where that came from. Oh, that's just like, so there's all these little things and what happened much more in the second book. And I actually talked to a religious scholar. Her name is Diana Pasulka about this. And we had a long conversation. And what I recognized, and I talked about it in the conclusion of the second book, is there is, I could say, Christian symbolism showing up, welling up. There's a story called Kristen in the Desert. This woman named Kristen, there we have it one more time, first 5 letters of her name spelled Christ. She went out into the desert. She did these trips and went out into the desert. She lived in Texas. And she was doing it for this compulsive reason. She went out in the desert alone. It's not too much of a leap. That to me is Christian symbolism. Someone named Kristen going out into the desert alone is I mean, that's what Christ did. He went to challenge. He went for, I can't remember, it was 40 days into the desert or something. But there was a lot of that showed up in the books. People who, and I'm not a practicing Christian and I'm not churchy in any way, but I was hearing the stories. My role was not to judge the accounts. Right. So someone tells me a story, I feel absolutely, I can quote them So these people, I heard one story after another. It wasn't the majority, but it was enough that there's a very clear pattern of people who were practicing Christians and had experiences with owls, less so with UFOs really, but more with owls, that fell into this, Christian symbolism. That's the way I phrased it. And I documented it as objectively as I could, but I made sure to include it. There was part of me, there was actually, the editor was like, should we leave this part out? And I'm like, oh no, we have to include this. So, one woman was very much into the New Age. She had amazing owl experiences, owl and UFO experiences. And she was doing tarot readings and Reiki therapy and oracle readings and during the process of writing her essay, she was converted. She had an awakening and a born again experience, and it was from seeing Sister Teresa, or I think it was this French nun that wrote a book called The Story of the Soul. She read that book and it changed her life, and she dropped the New Age completely and started becoming. She's a devout Christian, and that was real time in the writing of the book. Mm-hmm. That happened real time. Like as I was talking to her about her owl experiences, she's going through this conversion. So the book took about 2 years to write. So she was one of the first stories I started writing, and then over the 2 years, that happened real time. So I had to include that and write it out as straight and plainly as I could.
It sounds like you confront these stories without judgment. I mean, really, a lot of interviews I do, I look at it that way. I can't, if somebody says, they saw a UFO, I can't say, no, you didn't. I wasn't there. So, all stories are plausible. And certainly even the most bizarre stories people have said on this program, they interacted with something or had an interaction, some event happened. And, I just love to hear people's stories. And so I try to do it without judgment and such. In fact, one little story for you, Mike, is I was on my lawnmower one day on my rider, and then I thought, we were talking in the first hour about being thankful. Then I saw those birds there. I just stopped the lawnmower because it was a beautiful day, and I thought I'd just thank God for the day. And I looked over, and there's this praying mantis on this big piece of grass. I looked. What's the odds of seeing a praying mantis? Because to me, I got something from that. It wouldn't.
Well, hold it. So you just did what you said before. You were grateful in advance, right? So you were grateful just about the simplest thing, being out in a pleasant day, doing you were like doing work. You were mowing the lawn, right? So you're grateful, beautiful day. This is I get this is like. If there is, and I say this in the book because there's 3 stories called Owls and Gratitude. It's just people give gratitude in advance and have these magical experiences. And then a praying mantis, oh my God, a praying mantis is woven into the UFO lore. So, the people, that's very common right after, the gray aliens, people see giant praying mantises on board UFOs. Mm-hmm, yeah. And so that's very common. But that's perfect. That's perfect. It's exactly the question, like you go to the shaman in the teepee at the edge of the village and said, I looked to the sun and I said, thank you for this beautiful day. And then I saw a praying mantis. What does it mean? And it's like, you were grateful and you got an immediate response. I just think that to me is a pattern I've seen a little bit in the second book. And I just I just had to recognize, and this is something from doing outdoor work where I feel like I've had that experience many times.
There's some verse in the Bible, and somebody can bring it up. I'm not sure what it is, but it says something to the effect that people haven't heard the message, but nature declares that there is a God, so that all are without excuse. So, when I'm out there in nature, I mean, it's clear to me where that praying mantis or those beautiful birds or synchronicities, it's clear to me there is a nature's God out there that constructed this paradigm that we live in here. And I like what you said in the first hour. You said about kind of a clue, and you get these little clues, and to me it's exciting to be aware of them. And I always try to make myself aware and look at the situation wherever I am, whatever I'm doing. No matter, like we talk about riding a lawnmower there, the most mundane task, you might get a message if you're just open to it, And it's interesting. You heard that voice, and that I've heard voice before, so I can't really label you as crazy because I have to put myself in the same category, Mike.
Yeah, and I recognize. So what happened to me in 2006, boom, the following 3 years, well, probably up to about 2011. So that's like 5 years. The following 5 years, I was hit with so many synchronicities and so many owl sightings. And every synchronicity that I felt I had seemed to be either connected to an owl or a UFO, or like a UFO event or a UFO experiencer.
It's the box with my brand new vlog. Do pets like discounts? Let's find out. Talk to me, animal friends. Good point, dog.
There it is. I don't know what popped up. I don't know if that's a synchronicity or not. Give me that story again.
Yeah. So I can't remember, what was I saying? Initially when I said it, I wasn't kidding. I said I was a very tense person when I wrote that book. When I started that book, that first book was 4 years of therapy for me. And I came out the other side much more content, peaceful internally. And then what happened in the second book is I was talking to people on the phone, and they were the tense ones, right? And they were many of them said the act of working on the story, like, it solved a lot of, like, because you write the story out, like, okay, now you got to reread the story because you need to fact check it. It's your story, not mine. You're reading this whole thing again. Tell me what I missed. And they'll pick some great stuff like, well, you got this wrong. It was the afternoon. It wasn't morning. And then they'll say, but I had this. And so the people, not all of them, but many of the people in the second book had a kind of awakening experience through the act of working on their own story, the self-exploration. I was kind of I was the scribe in a way to their story. And I took that responsibility very seriously because I understood it, because that was my direct experience, to be tense. I talked to a lot of tense people. Well, if you want to talk to some tense people, take some UFO reports.
And I would say probably the abductees are going to be more tense.
They can be pretty tense, yeah. And then they can come out the other end and be actually like almost, sometimes it can be a little hard to take. They can be so love and light and peaceful. That's not all of them, but that is a pattern. People respond in different ways to this dramatic stimuli.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike Clelland, where do you see yourself heading in the next few years? Where are you going with all this? More hiking, more owl stuff? What?
So like, I don't need to write another owl book. I'm from this, like, I'm cautious. I'm to write another owl book.
I'll just call you Mr. Owl right now. So,
Well, I'm the owl guy. Yeah, people call me that all the time. So I get introduced as the owl guy. So in the short term, I want to do a audio book on tape of the books. Okay. And I want to just get back more into the research. I don't know what I feel like I've turned into a writer through this process, and I feel like there's going to be another book. I'm thinking about a book of fiction, trying to tackle this story through fiction where I think it was Jim Mars wrote a fiction book. He said, the problem with fiction is it's really hard to write because fiction has to make sense. And it doesn't. So when you're writing someone's story, like this owl book doesn't have to make sense because it's not fiction, but a fiction book needs to make sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of writing a fiction book with an owls and UFOs as part of the theme.
Okay. Well, Mike Clelland, we're right at the end of the broadcast. Anything you'd like to say about your website or how to get your books or Amazon? Anything you'd like to say? Go ahead.
You type in owls, UFO. My name is going to be the first thing that comes up. You'll find my website. You can go right to Amazon and type in The Messengers. Both books will come up. And you can type my name, Mike Clelland, Clelland. My website is Hidden Experience, which is hiddenexperience.blogspot.com. I've got, like, good grief, 9 years worth of stuff all archived in there, and it's a bottomless pit of what I consider very, very interesting stuff. I'm very proud of the work I've done on that site.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Mike Clelland, I appreciate you coming on the Edge Television broadcast. Can we have you on again sometime?
I would love to. This was a delight.
All right. Then we'll do that. The audio and video will be posted here shortly, and I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right. You bet.
Bye.
Everybody.